Okay, so we'll start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so we're going to continue now with the discussion of Sutta number 117. This is the discourse on the Great 40, the Mahacattarisaka Sutta. Okay, just to review what we covered the last time, the Buddha begins the sutta by announcing that he's going to teach what is called the Noble Right concentration with its supports and its requisites. Noble Right concentration, this is Arya Sama Samadhi. Then the supports and requisites of Noble Right concentration are the other 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, that is, from right view and right mindfulness. And the Noble Right concentration is, we're on page 934, the Noble Right concentration is unification of mind equipped with these 7 factors. So these 7 factors, the other 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, are the supports and requisites for Noble Right concentration, which is unification or one-pointedness of mind. So in other words, this sutta is going to be expounding the Noble Eightfold Path, but not in the usual sequential manner, but rather it's taking Noble Right concentration, as you could say, the core, the peak, the essence of the Noble Path, as though the Noble Right concentration is the sun, and the other 7 factors are like the planets revolving around the sun. Okay, so then in analyzing the other factors that support and accompany right concentration, the Buddha starts with right view. And first he distinguishes right view from wrong view. Wrong view being the view that denies karmic causation and which denies the value of doing good deeds and so forth. But then he introduces, and this is quite unique to this sutta, a distinction between 2 kinds of right view. He says that right view is twofold. There's the right view which is accompanied by or connected with the asavas, with the fundamental defilements, which partakes of merit and ripens in the acquisitions. That is, it leads back into new birth, into new existence, back into samsara, probably in a favorable condition because it's a right view, But this is a right view, which is, you could say, it's the right view of the mundane path of practice. The right view that leads to the accumulation of merit and to a fortunate rebirth in the future. But it's not the right view that leads to liberation. The right view that leads to liberation is called the right view that is noble, taintless, supermundane, a factor of the past. Again, these are words or expressions which are almost, let's say that they're uniquely used in this sutta to describe a factor of the past. And so we seem to be, the sutta is making a distinction between two kinds of path. There's the mundane, meritorious path and the world-transcending, liberating path. Okay, so then, having set up this distinction among the path factors, dividing them by way of these two kinds of paths, then the Buddha defines the right view that's connected with the taints, partaking of merit, leading to a fortunate rebirth, as the view that affirms karmic causation, that affirms the value or the virtue of doing good, wholesome deeds. And then when we come to the right view that's called noble, taintless, supermundane, a factor of the path, as I said last time, the content of that view is not explicit, it's not made explicit, but rather the view, this world-transcending right view, is explained simply by enumerating a number of terms which are used throughout the suttas to represent wisdom. And so we have, what is this world-transcending right view? It's wisdom, the faculty of wisdom, the power of wisdom, the investigation of states enlightenment factor, the path factor of right view in the mind that is noble, the mind that's taintless, the mind that possesses the noble path, and so on. So that is the world transcending right view. And then we have the right effort is brought in as the effort to abandon wrong view and to acquire right view. And right mindfulness comes in insofar as with mindfulness one abandons wrong view, and with mindfulness one acquires right view. Okay, so then the Buddha says that these three states, that is the preliminary right view, the right effort, and right mindfulness, circle around right view. Okay, so that is just a recapitulation of what we covered last time. Now we'll go on to new material. And here it gets really interesting and a little bit surprising. Okay, so now the Buddha takes up the next factor of the path in the normal sequence. This is Samma Sankappa, which is right intention. And he begins again by bringing in right view, because right view is essential to developing every factor of the Eightfold Path. And that is because right view, in one of its functions, has the task of distinguishing between what is right and what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, what is beneficial, what is harmful. So with respect to intention, sankappa, the Buddha says, right view again comes first. And how does right view come first? One understands wrong intention as wrong intention, and right intention as right intention. That is one's right view. I mean, this is quite, it seems almost tautological, self-evident, but it's really quite significant. Because, without the clarity of presentation that we find in the Buddha's teaching, we can think that what is really a wrong intention is right intention. Like nowadays, people think, the way to happiness is to indulge your sensual desires. And so they say, eat, drink, and be merry, dance and sing, and enjoy yourself while you can. Time is fleeting, you're young, healthy, vigorous. Enjoy life while you can. That's making the right use of your life. And so this is, in a way, taking wrong intention, the intention of sensual indulgence, to be right intention. Or people also say that if somebody is mean to you, nasty to you, hit him, punch him. Knock him down. Don't take nonsense from him. You could show that yours is just as strong as he is. And if somebody harms you, get back at him, retaliate. So this is, again, taking wrong intention to be right intention. And so if you have right view, then you know when you're being bombarded with messages telling you to do what is wrong, then you know that this is wrong. And you know what you have to do that's right. So, to have right view means that you're able to distinguish not only when other people tell you what to do, but when the thoughts come into your mind, I should do this. Let me enjoy myself. They're all getting rich. They're all enjoying themselves. Why am I staying quietly at home, depriving myself of the pleasures of life, just because this stupid book tells me refrain from sensual misconduct? So then the voice will arise saying, hey, those thoughts are wrong intention. The thought comes, let me strike back at that nasty guy who always speaks to me in a rather crude way at work. I'm always trying to be so polite to him. I don't have to take that nonsense anymore. I could show him that I'm the tough guy in the block, right? So then when that thought comes, then you realize this is a wrong intention, and you dismiss it. Okay, so you understand right and wrong intention and right intention, each for what they are. Then what is wrong intention? This is the usual explanation. It's the intention or the motivation of indulging in sensual desire, the intention of ill will, that's anger or hatred or resentment, and then the intention, here is translated as cruelty, but maybe better, the intention of harmfulness, the intention of wanting to inflict harm and suffering on others. Sometimes the question comes up, what is the difference between the intention of ill will and the intention of harming? Anybody have any ideas about that? They seem to be quite similar. You know?
Ill will does not necessarily mean that I'm thinking ill will does not necessarily mean that it is my intention to harm, but I wish that ill will from another source occurs.
Or that from some other source harm will come to that
Yes.
person. That seems to be the difference. What's interesting is that, like I haven't seen in the commentaries, I don't think I've seen them bring up explicitly a discussion of the difference between ill will and the intention of harming. They always seem to almost to assume that it's self-evident. But it seems that whenever there's the intention of harming, that there's ill will is behind it. But maybe the intention of harming has such a specific character of its own that it's sort of been separated off from ill will and made a separate kind of wrong intention. And also the idea of non-harming becomes quite prominent throughout the different schools of Indian thought. In Pali, non-harming is called avihingsa. But the Jains, you see the V here is just an intensification. So the Jains call it ahimsa. And that word was taken over by Gandhi. So Gandhi called one aspect of his philosophy the philosophy of ahimsa. And then that was sort of taken over by, or adopted by Martin Luther King. Well, maybe he was the original one, but he adopted the expression, the philosophy of nonviolence. And so nonviolence then is sort of a representation in English of the term ahimsa, which comes from Jainism, a school that was contemporary with the Buddha. And the Buddha expressed the same idea as avihimsa, non-harming. Okay, so we have these three types of wrong intention. And now this is the interesting passage. Okay, the Buddha says, what is right intention? And again he says right intention is twofold. There is the right intention that is tainted, that creates merit, that ripens in the acquisitions. That means that it leads back to a new set, it leads back to rebirth. But as right intention, it will lead to a fortunate or happy rebirth. And then there is right intention that is noble, taintless, supermundane, a factor of the path. Then the Buddha, now he's going to define each of these two expressions. So he says, what is the right intention that is connected with the taints, that creates merit, that leads to a fortunate rebirth? It's the intention of renunciation, or the giving up of sensual desires, the intention of non-ill will, and the intention of non-cruelty, or maybe more accurately, the intention of non-harming. So that is the right intention that's that's connected with the taints and so on. Now what makes this interesting is that if we look at the sutta, another sutta, which explains the Noble Eightfold Path as the way to the cessation of suffering, and then we look at the definition of the path factors, we'll see that right intention is defined exactly in this way. For example, Sutta number 141. This is on page 1100. We'll go back to 1099, the very bottom of 1099. And this is actually Venerable Sariputta speaking, but elsewhere we find these same definitions coming from the Buddha. He says, what, friends, is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering? It's the Noble Eightfold Path, right view, and so on. Then in section 25, and what is right intention? It's the intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will. Let's make this a little more positive. The intention of goodwill and the intention of non-harming or harmlessness. So that is the right intention which belongs to the Noble Eightfold Path, the path leading to the end of suffering, the liberating path, the path leading to Nibbana. But here, in Sutta number 117, it seems almost as if that definition of right intention has been you want to call it demoted, dropped down to part of the mundane path, the path leading to a fortunate rebirth. And then we find in the book of the Abhidharma, this is the second book of the Abhidharma called the Vibhanga, the book of analysis, in the chapter on the path constituents. This is chapter 11. We find that this book makes a distinction between two ways of treating or analyzing the Noble Eightfold Path. It distinguishes between the method of the suttas and the method of the Abhidharma. And then we look at the analysis according to the suttas, then we find what is right thought, or this is right intention, the intention associated with renunciation, the intention associated with non-ill will, the intention associated with non-cruelty. This is called right intention according to the Sutta method of analysis. Actually, I got ahead of myself, because to complete the discussion, we have to go back to the Sutta, Mahacattarisaka Sutta. And what monks, number 14, what monks is right intention that is noble, taintless, supermundane, a factor of the path? And now we find the right intention explained not in terms of its actual contents, but rather it's explained by way of the mental factor that is sort of responsible for right intention. So what is this right intention? It's the thinking, the thought, the intention, the mental application, mental fixity, the directing of mind, the verbal formation in one whose mind is noble, whose mind is taintless, who possesses the noble path and is developing the noble path. That is the right intention that is noble, a factor of the path. So this way of explanation, by treating what was originally a practical method of definition, typical of the suttas, instead treating it by way of a series of synonyms that specify that factor as a particular mental factor. This is the typical Abhidharma mode of analysis. So we see, at least it's my opinion, but also the opinion of more accomplished academic scholars, that this text has been somewhat reworked, either because the Abhidharma had already developed to some extent, and some styles of thinking distinctive of the Abhidharma were being transposed back into the sutta, which originally could have been simpler, simply following the ordinary sutta style of explanation. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that the Abhidharma hadn't yet really crystallized or taken shape, but discussions were going on in the Sangha along the lines that were to form the Abhidhamma, and then some of those ideas, themes of the methods of analysis that were emerging in the discussions amongst the monks were then brought back into the sutta as a way of giving a more precise explanation of the path factors. So just a moment ago, I read out for you how right intention is defined in the Abhidhamma according to the Sutta method of analysis. But then the second subdivision of this chapter deals with the Abhidhamma method of analysis. And here we find, what is the Eightfold Path? Again, right view, right thought, to right concentration. Then what is right intention? It is that which is thinking, thought, intention, the application of the mind, the focusing of the mind, the directing of the mind, the path constituent, the factor included in the path. That is called right intention. So that you could see that they're almost identical. And so in this sutta, the Mahacattarisaka Sutta, we see that material from the Abhidhamma, or at least the method of treatment distinctive of the Abhidhamma, has been brought in to clarify the nature of right thought. And one thing that might be a little bit puzzling in this definition, well, first let me explain why right intention is explained in terms of thought, thinking, and so on. For right intention, the sutta uses the term sama sankappa. But elsewhere in the suttas, we find the same types of wrong thought, or the same types of wrong intention and right intention represented by another word, vitakka. And so, sankappa and vitakka are synonymous terms, which is why sometimes some translators will render the second factor of the path as right thought. Except for me, I find the problem with right thought is that it seems to me that the English word thought can comprise both right view and right intention. Whereas what is meant by sankappa, you could see from the explanation in terms of renunciation, goodwill, and non-harming, it's more the motivational or purposive aspect of thought rather than the intellectual, conceptual aspect of thought. And so that's why we have what is right intention, thinking, thought, intention, then mental application. That's because sankappa, intention, is seen to have the function of directing the mind to the object or applying the mind onto its object. And then what's a little bit puzzling is the expression verbal formation. The reason why verbal formation is used here, this is based or related to a statement made in another sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. This is sutta number 44. The Chula Vedala Sutta on page 399, where there's a bhikkhuni named Dhammadina. She is answering questions. And the layman who's questioning her says, this is in section 15 on that page. He says, why are applied thought and sustained thought called the verbal formation? Here, applied thought is vitakka. So why is vitakka called the verbal formation? And then she explains, first one uses applied thought and sustained thought, and afterwards one breaks out into speech. And so before you're speaking, even if it's very quickly, almost momentarily, thoughts arise in the mind. And so when you speak, you're giving expression to the thoughts that have arisen in the mind. If you didn't formulate thoughts and just spoke, then just nonsense would come out, like a baby crying. Wah, 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 wah. Okay, now this is a difference between the right intention, which pertains to the mundane path, and the world-transcending right intention. The mundane right intention is this faculty of thought, this power of thought, vitakka, which is accompanied by a certain purpose. The three purposes that are enumerated here: the purpose of renunciation, which doesn't mean that one has to, give up the household life to become a monk or nun, but it means giving up, letting go of sensual desires. So even when one is practicing generosity, say making a donation to a worthy cause, offering food to a hungry person, or even giving gifts to one's friends and family, without the intention of getting a gift in return, one is giving up or letting go of attachment in some form. So that is the intention of renunciation. Or maybe if renunciation sounds too strong, we could say the intention of letting go, the intention of giving up. And then whenever one is either being patient with the person who is provoking you, or extending thoughts of kindness and goodwill to anyone, then you're developing, bringing into being the intention of goodwill, which is almost synonymous with metta, loving kindness. And then whenever you have some kind of impulse to retaliate against somebody, to create misery for somebody, to inflict either physical harm or psychological harm on others, and you restrain that intention and instead arouse the intention to treat them well, to treat them politely, cordially, or if they're in suffering, to help them out of their suffering, then you're developing the intention of harmlessness or non-cruelty. So that is the right intention, which is here said to be part of the mundane path. So what is the world-transcending right intention? Okay, now looking at this from the perspective of the Abhidhamma, when a person develops insight, wisdom, there is the intention, which is the thought, power of thought, directing the mind to the object of insight, the thought which is repeatedly bringing, or the direction of the mind to the object of insight. This, we could say, is the right thought or right intention on the preliminary phase of the Noble Path. But when the sequence of insight, knowledges comes to its culmination, then what occurs is the experience which is called the breakthrough to the Dharma, or the attainment of the world-transcending path. And that is the single moment of awakening, or maybe call it the flash of enlightenment. And what happens then is that the mind has turned away from all conditioned phenomena, from everything included in the five aggregates, and it's, in a sense, you could say it's jumped out upon Nibbana, or it's penetrated right through conditioned phenomena to the unconditioned, to Nibbana. And that state of mind, that moment of consciousness, consists of a whole cluster of mental factors. And among those mental factors, there will be 8 factors which are exercising especially prominent roles. And those will be the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. And amongst those 8 factors, one of them will be right intention. Or one of those factors will be the factor of thought, vitakka. And when that thought, directed thought, is taking Nibbana as the object of realization, then that thought becomes the world-transcending or taintless right intention. And that right intention has the function of cutting off or reducing wrong intention. In our ordinary day-to-day life, wrong intentions arise, as students of the Dharma. We know these wrong intentions are wrong, and so we make the effort to overcome them. We try to oppose them with right intention. And as we go on cultivating right intention, we'll find that the task becomes easier, a little by little easier. But the wrong intention is always there, just below the surface. And when we're not completely diligent and heedful, then the wrong thoughts, wrong intentions start coming up to the surface. But the world-transcending right intention has the function of cutting off permanently the wrong thoughts. It doesn't do this all at once, but in stages. So the first breakthrough, that of stream entry, cuts off the grossest type of wrong intentions. Then the next breakthrough to the stage of once returner cuts off the wrong intentions, which are a little subtler. Then the next breakthrough to the stage of, actually it would seem that the stage of non-returner would permanently cut off the intention of ill will and the intention of harming or cruelty, and even the intention of enjoying sensual desires. But there'll still be, even for the non-returner, still a subtle intention of desire to experience the delights of some of the higher celestial realms. But then with the breakthrough to arahatship, then even the subtlest wrong intention of desire will be cut off permanently. Okay, so then the text says that one makes the effort to abandon wrong intention and to acquire right intention. That is the right effort. And then one goes about this task, abandoning wrong intention and acquiring right intention. One goes about it with mindfulness. So that is one's right mindfulness. And so we have these three states that run and circle around right intention. That is the preliminary right view, which distinguishes wrong view, the preliminary right view, which distinguishes wrong intention and right intention, the right effort to abandon the wrong, to acquire the right intention, and the mindfulness, the right mindfulness, with which one abandons wrong intention and acquires right intention. Okay, maybe at this point I should ask whether there's any questions. Oh, Barbara, go ahead.
What is the event? Why is this talked about in terms of two paths rather than a path like the mundane path leading into the world transcending path?
Why is this explained by making the sharp distinction between two paths rather than the mundane path leading up to the world?
Yes.
Really, that is actually the way it works, is that looking at the path from what I would call a strictly sutta standpoint, one would say that it's the preliminary practice of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, which are the preliminary practice is a mundane path, but that will culminate in the world transcending path. So that's your question makes a good point, which is actually true and valid. But I think that this sutta, the way it's come down, and as I said, it seems to have come down in this way because it's absorbed material from the emerging Abhidhamma way of thinking. So I think it's explained in this way just to distinguish between the two paths. But I think definitely we have to understand that the mundane path leads to and merges into the world transcending path. And maybe that is why, especially maybe why right mindfulness is not taken up for separate analysis, Because if one were to take right mindfulness for analysis, then one would have to take, the stock formula on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and the preservers of the sutta wouldn't want to say that the 4 foundations of mindfulness is a tainted path connected with with merit leading to a fortunate rebirth. Because the Buddha says that this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for attaining the right method, for overcoming sorrow and suffering, for the realization of Nibbana. So they would get into a contradiction. So I think that is why they stop, as we'll see, they stop at right livelihood. Ravi?
Bhante, the question with reference to right view, sammaditthi, my understanding is that this is based on rebirth, understanding of rebirth and karma and rebirth and whatever. Does it not include anicca, dukkha, anatma? Because which is, to me, it sounds a very primary view.
Yeah, and this is this is an important point, that the sutta, when it's explaining the right view of the preliminary path, or the right view which is tainted, subject to create, which generates merit, leads to a fortunate rebirth. It just does so in terms of the right view to which one accepts karma and karmic causation. But the sutta doesn't mention the right view, which is insight into the 3 characteristics. So it seems to me that kind of right view has to be brought in as the preliminary stage of the world-transcending right view. Now, the world-transcending right view, the content of that view is not mentioned here. It just explains it in terms of a list of synonyms for the mental factor of wisdom. But the content of the world-transcending right view would be the direct, penetrative understanding of the 4 Noble Truths. But the right view that, as Barbara put it, that leads up to and culminates in the world-transcending right view, that would be the insight right view of the 3 marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, and non-self.
Thank you, Bhante.
Sorry.
Bhante, just to follow up on what you just said about right view that leads to the understanding of the 3 characteristics. So then the right view becomes wisdom, isn't it?
Yeah, that is right view, is it's actually turning from a view into wisdom.
So then,
but even before one actually develops insight into the 3 characteristics, but if just through study of the text and reflection one comes to an intellectual acceptance of the 3 characteristics, that would be a right view too, which is not yet insight wisdom, but it's a right view, you could say, that's in accordance with insight wisdom.
So the next question will be with regard to this. Right view becomes a wisdom, and so then wisdom and right view is the same.
Let us say that when right view moves from a purely intellectual or conceptual grasp of the principles to actual insight into those principles, then it becomes what we call wisdom.
Thank you.
Though one could say even the preliminary right view, even when it's intellectual or conceptual, we could say it's like the little baby of wisdom, or wisdom in the baby stage. You know, it's the kind of, like a baby is going to grow into an adult, and so this is the wisdom, you know, just after it takes birth, but it still has to be nurtured and, you know, sustained and supported to turn into what we call real wisdom. Any other questions? Okay, then let's move on to the next path factors. And we're going to see that the next set of path factors are treated in a similar way to right intention. Okay, so we take the next one is speech. We're following the ordinary sequence. Is that from yours? Maybe turn that off. Okay, we're following the ordinary sequence of the Eightfold Path, so now we come to right speech, or we come to speech. And so again, one relies on right view to distinguish wrong speech and right speech, and that is the right view. Okay, then what is wrong speech? Again, this is standard definition in the suttas: speaking deliberate falsehood, malicious speech. It's a speech which is intended to create conflict and disharmony between friends, harsh or angry speech, and then gossip or idle chatter. Okay, then comes right speech. And again, we get a distinction between two types of right speech. The right speech that's associated with the taints, and the right speech that is noble, taintless, world transcending. Okay, then what is the right speech that's connected with the taints, partaking of merit and so on? Then it's explained as abstaining from false speech, abstaining from malicious speech, abstaining from harsh speech, abstaining from gossip. So that's the right speech connected with the taints. And then again, if you would look on page 1100, I don't think you even have to turn to it, but you find what is the definition of right speech, which is a factor of the Noble Eightfold Path leading to the cessation of suffering. There it's explained or defined exactly in the same way. So here again, it seems that that kind of right speech has been brought down to a lower level, and then we have the right speech that's noble, taintless, world transcending, a factor of the path. Okay, I'll read that definition. It is the desisting from the four kinds of verbal misconduct, the abstaining, the refraining, abstinence from them, in one whose mind is noble, whose mind is taintless, who possesses the noble path and is developing the noble path. And then for right effort and right mindfulness, again, the explanation is parallel to that of right intention. Okay, again, I just want to compare these definitions to that in the Abhidhamma Vibhanga, the book of analysis. Here in the analysis according to the suttas, we have what is right speech, abstaining from false speech, from divisive speech, from harsh speech, from frivolous chatter or gossip. That is right speech. And then what is the right speech according to the Abhidhamma analysis? The desisting from the 4 types of verbal wrong speech, refraining from them, abstaining from them, not committing them, not doing them, not overstepping the limits, putting a permanent end to the 4 types of wrong speech. That is the right speech. That's a factor of the path. So you see again, very, very close correspondence between them. Okay, this is a way we should understand the distinction between them. Like, as one is conducting or carrying on one's day-to-day life, whenever one is, tempted to speak in an unwholesome way, either by telling a deliberate lie, by speaking maliciously to create divisions between people, to speak angrily, or to indulge in idle gossip, then when one realizes this is wrong speech and one makes the effort to refrain from that speech, then one is practicing what is called the mundane right speech. But I would say that this mundane right speech could have 2 aspects. It could be the aspect of somebody who is just content to follow a meritorious way of life, and so avoids wrong speech, abstains from wrong speech, in order to create merit, to ensure themselves of a happy rebirth. But it can also be the right speech of somebody who is following the Noble Eightfold Path according to the Sutta way of explanation, with the aim of reaching the truly world-transcending Noble Eightfold Path. But it would still be explained in the same way, abstaining from these 4 types of verbal misconduct. Okay, but as that person is cultivating the path of insight and then reaches the culmination of the path of insight, that is when he makes the breakthrough to the realization of the world-transcending path, that moment of, or that flash of enlightenment or moment of awakening to the ultimate truth. Again, this is a state of consciousness in which amongst its constituents there is one factor called right speech, which here has the function of cutting off to some extent the disposition to the 4 types of verbal misconduct. So this is a difference in developing the mundane path. Right speech becomes active only on those occasions when we are inclined to engage in wrong speech, but we make the deliberate effort to abstain from the wrong speech and to speak rightly, to speak truthfully, to speak in ways that reconcile people who are divided, to speak politely and respectfully to others, and to speak meaningfully, not to speak to indulge in idle gossip. And so right speech occurs on specific occasions, and when it occurs in one mode or another. That is, one is either refraining from telling a lie, refraining from divisive speech, refraining from harsh speech, refraining from gossip. So it occurs only in one particular mode out of those four modes. And if one is not in a situation where one is inclined to speak at all, for example, if you're just all alone taking a walk, say around a monastery, nobody else is around, so you're not going to be speaking unless you speak to yourself. But otherwise you won't be speaking. On that occasion, we can't say that there's right speech present. But if you meet somebody and then the person says something and then the temptation or inclination to speak something which is wrong arises, then you block that, you refrain from that, then right speech becomes active. And if you're inclined to tell a lie, then the right speech occurs in that way. If you're inclined to speak maliciously about others, the right speech occurs in that way. If you're getting angry with the person or people you're with, and you're inclined to speak in an angry way to them, then the right speech occurs as resisting the temptation to harsh speech. And if you're inclined just to indulge in gossip, you know what happened to this one, you know what happened to that one, then right speech is occurring in that mode. So either it doesn't occur, or it's occurring in one mode or another. But when the world transcending right speech occurs, simultaneously it is inhibiting and cutting off to some degree the tendency to indulge in all four types of wrong speech. Simultaneously, it cuts off those tendencies. Okay, so this takes care of the factor of speech. Let's go through livelihood. At least let's take right action, and then I'll ask whether there's any questions. Okay, right action is basically treated in the same way as right speech. Okay, right view comes first, distinguishes wrong action and right action. So the ability to make that discrimination is one's right view. Then what is wrong action? And here we have the three classical types of wrong action. That is the killing of living beings, stealing or taking what is not given, and misconduct in regard to sensual pleasures, usually called sensual misconduct. So that, or misconduct in regard to sexual pleasures. So this is wrong action. Then right action, we have the same twofold distinction. The right action that is connected with the taints, that creates merit, that leads to a fortunate rebirth, is abstaining from killing living beings, abstaining from taking what is not given, abstaining from sexual misconduct. And then we have the right action that is noble, world transcending, a factor of the path. This is desisting from the three kinds of bodily misconduct, abstaining from them, refraining from them, abstinence from them, in one whose mind is noble, and so on, one who is developing the noble path. So in a similar way, in our day-to-day life, when there is some impulse to either take life or even to inflict physical harm on others, and then we refrain from doing so, that is mundane right action. If we're tempted to steal, to misappropriate the belongings of others, we abstain from doing this. Again, that's the right action or the second aspect of right action. if we're tempted to indulge in sexual misconduct and we refrain from doing so, then that's the third aspect of right action. If there is no inclination to any of these on any occasion, we're just, walking, minding our own business, then we could say that right action is not present. Okay, so this is the mundane right action. And then the world-transcending right action would be when that breakthrough to the world-transcending path occurs, one of the mental factors present on that occasion will be a factor called right action. And that factor called right action has the function of cutting off to some degree the tendency to the three types of wrong action. Cutting them off to some degree permanently so that they can't occur again. Again, I have to add, in accordance with the point brought up by Barbara, that somebody who is developing the Eightfold Path with the aim of reaching the truly noble world-transcending path will also be developing the right action as abstaining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. But in that case, even though it's creating merit and will be leading to a fortunate rebirth, the motivation is not just to receive a fortunate rebirth, but to reach the transcendent Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, and then right effort, right mindfulness should be understood in the same way as for the earlier factors. Okay, maybe at this point I'll ask whether there are any questions. No questions. Hector, you had a question. Did you have a question?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, please then take the microphone. Just speak with a loud voice.
Okay.
I think it's that humming is driving a few people into wrong thought, wrong intentions. Okay, just speak loudly.
I guess in order to try to clarify the mundane versus the super mundane,
Yeah.
I just generally say that when we abstain from a wrong action or
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
mundane, and we're the mundane path, but when we abandon, when we develop,
Yeah.
erasing pain, so by abandoning any desire to do those things,
Yeah.
that becomes super mundane.
Yeah, that's a good way to do that, to express that. Yeah, so just for the recorder, he said that a way to distinguish between the mundane path and the world-transcending path is that in the mundane path, we are sort of, how did you put that, deliberately abstaining from any of these wrong types of conduct, whereas the world-transcending path is eliminating or abandoning even the disposition to speak or act in those ways, or think in those ways. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Okay, so let's try to finish this sutta today, because the rest unfolds almost quite naturally from what has been said already. Okay, then we come to the livelihood path factor. So then we have right view coming first to distinguish between wrong livelihood and right livelihood. So that is one's right view. And then we have wrong livelihood. I'm still hearing a humming. Is that coming from... That one is off? Maybe it's my imagination. Maybe I'm getting tinnitus.
Yes, there.
It is coming.
I don't hear it now.
Okay. Okay, so then what is wrong livelihood? And these explanations might seem a little strange to you, but here wrong livelihood is being explained by a series of terms which apply to a monastic. Because livelihood doesn't mean only working at a job to get one's means of subsistence, but any method by which one gains the means of subsistence. And so for monastics too, there are right ways and wrong ways of getting the means of subsistence. The right means are by receiving offerings from people. And of course, if there's a trusted dayaka or lay supporter who says, if you need anything, just let me know, then it's quite all right to tell them what you need, providing that you respect the limits. Like somebody says, what do you need? Let's see, I'm getting tired of traveling by train and by bus. How about a nice little Mercedes or a BMW? And so those are the right methods, either receiving as a straightforward offering or by invitation from supporters, or by asking somebody that one trusts who shows that they're willing to make offerings if things are needed. But then the wrong types of livelihood is scheming, getting into schemes in order to try to get people to give things. Talking, this is not ordinary talking, but trying to persuade people. If you were to give me a BMW, you would get enormous merit. I'm sure you'll get reborn in the two-seater Deva world, and it'll be a guarantee that you'll meet Maitreya Buddha and get to hear the Dhamma from him, hinting like, there's a driveway leading up to Taishu Hall, and doesn't something seem to be missing from that driveway? Wouldn't it look, more complete if there was a BMW or a Rolls Royce there with a chauffeur waiting? Belittling. This is like putting down a person, like, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, who lived down the road, they gave me such a sumptuous alms offering last week. They gave me a bowl of rice with 15 side dishes. And what are you offering? Just a little handful of rice and a couple of side dishes? You could do just as well as they. Shouldn't you be doing just as well as they could? Then there's pursuing gain with gain. That is, one receives one offering and then one trades it in for other offerings. So these are the types of wrong livelihood. I believe in the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification. And the first chapter, the chapter on the description of sila, of virtuous conduct, it gives full explanations of these types of wrong livelihood. Okay, so then what is right livelihood? Again, right livelihood is twofold. That which is connected with taints, mundane, partaking of merit, and then the one which is taintless, supermundane. Okay, the one that is affected by taints, the noble disciple abandons wrong livelihood and gains his living by a right livelihood. That's the standard definition of right livelihood, even in other suttas on the Noble Eightfold Path. And then we have what is the noble, world-transcending right livelihood. It's the desisting from wrong livelihood, abstaining, refraining, abstinence from it, and one whose mind is noble, and so forth, a factor of the path. And then right effort and right mindfulness are brought in the same way. Okay, just to complete the sutta, I'm going to complete it in 5 minutes because all of the rest is quite almost evident. And the sequel explains why it's called the Great 40. Okay, we start off again with right view. Then from right view comes right intention. Then comes right speech, right action, right livelihood. Then right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This has to be understood, or let's say, I would say that this statement needs a little clarification or explanation in that, okay, right view generally comes first, and from right view, it'll come right intention, in that right intention or right motivation is founded on right view. But when there's right motivation, it's not actually the case that right speech comes before right action and right action before right livelihood, but we should understand right speech, right action, and right livelihood all come into being together. And throughout this whole process, there has to be right effort and right mindfulness, even from the stage of right view. So right effort and right mindfulness, you could say, run through the whole path, all the 8 factors of the path. But I would say that when you have the 3 sila factors of right speech, right action, right livelihood, those become the foundation for the more intensive effort in mental purification through meditation. And that intensive effort in meditation comes through the coordinated work of right effort and right mindfulness. So it's actually the effort to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And then when right effort and right mindfulness are working together and they reach some point of success, then there arises right concentration, right samadhi, which is usually defined as the 4 jhanas, or meditative absorptions. Okay, then in one of right concentration, right knowledge comes into being. So we could say that this is the right knowledge of the world-transcending path, particularly the right knowledge of the last stage of the path of arhatship. And then when that comes into being, through that right knowledge, that full understanding of the 4 Noble Truths, then there comes right actually I like right liberation better than right deliverance. But actually the way, I have to backtrack a little. No, I don't have to backtrack. Okay, so then he's saying, thus the path of the disciple in higher training possesses 8 factors. So one who's in training has the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, whereas the Arahant possesses 10 factors. That is, the Arahant possesses, in addition to the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, the Arahant has right knowledge and right liberation. Okay, then we have section 35, right view comes first. So when right view arises, then it abolishes wrong view as well as the many other unwholesome qualities conditioned by wrong view. And when right view arises, it brings into being many other wholesome qualities that take right view as their condition. So we have right view eliminates wrong view. Right view brings into being many other accompanying factors, and right view eliminates the other unwholesome factors connected with wrong view. And then the same is said with regard to intention, speech, and so on, up to right concentration, then to right knowledge and right liberation. And so we have right liberation arises, it abolishes wrong liberation, it abolishes the bad qualities connected with wrong liberation, and it brings into being the many good qualities connected with right liberation. And so in this way we have 20 factors on the side of the wholesome, that is the 10 right factors and the 10 sets of wholesome qualities associated with the 10 wholesome factors. And we have 20 factors on the side of the unwholesome, that is wrong view to wrong liberation, and the bad qualities associated with wrong view to wrong liberation. So we have 20 on the good side, 20 on the bad side, so that makes 40 altogether. So then the Buddha says that this Dhamma discourse on the Great 40 has been set rolling and it cannot be stopped by any ascetic or Brahmin, by any Deva or Mara or Brahma or anyone in the world. Then he speaks the next paragraph how if anybody criticizes this discourse on the Great 40, then he incurs certain grounds for being criticized himself. And then he says, the last paragraph, he says, even those teachers from Okala, they're named Vassa and Banya, who held the doctrine of non-causality, the doctrine of non-doing, the doctrine of nihilism. That is, I think Okala is what's the state in India that's now called Orissa, on the east, along the eastern seaboard, south of Bengal, north of Andhra Pradesh. And apparently there were these famous teachers there who taught these doctrines that the Buddha considered heretical, denying moral causation, denying the moral significance of actions, and saying that there's no fruit or result of good and bad deeds. So the Buddha says, even those teachers would not think of criticizing this Dhamma discourse on the Great 40. And what is the reason for that? Because they would be afraid of being blamed, attacked, and refuted. And that is the end of the discourse on the Great 40. Okay, maybe since it's 11:30 now, maybe at this point we'll just do the dedication of merit and then break for lunch. Then we'll come back. We'll take it leisurely. We'll come back 12:30, and then we can discuss any points that arise. Any questions from the internet?
Allah and the yoga ability to organize it. I'm asking them to resend it at the very beginning of the discussion.
Okay, so they'll rejoin us at 12:30. Okay, so then we could take their questions at 12:30 too. Okay, so let us end. Did we have the sheets for the sharing of the merits? Oh, last time it was Chin who handed them out. Don't worry, I'll just recite, and you just recite along with me. Okay, so we share the merit with the Devas, the Bhutas, the Nagas, and other beings, wishing them to be well, happy, and to protect the Dharma. Akasata chabhumata deva naga mahedika punyantang anumodita chirang rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabhumata deva naga mahedika punyantang anumodita chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabhumata deva naga mahedika punyantang anumodita chirang rakantu mang parang. I'll do the next one in the short style. Etavatacham heihi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Bhavagopadaya avichihetato etantare satakayupapana rupya rupicha asanya sanino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibhuting. Okay, we could stand and end with 3 half bows.